Abraham Lincoln was born on February 12, 1809, in a one-room log cabin in Hardin County, Kentucky. There were no marble halls, no portraits on the walls, no signs that this child would one day carry the weight of a fractured nation on his shoulders. The floor was dirt, the roof leaked, winter winds slipped through the cracks in the wood. Poverty was not a temporary condition for the Lincolns. It was their reality. His father, Thomas Lincoln, worked the land with relentless physical endurance, but little financial reward. His mother, Nancy Hanks Lincoln, possessed quiet intelligence and moral clarity. From her, Abraham absorbed something more valuable than land or money. He absorbed empathy. When Abraham was 9 years old, tragedy struck. His mother died from milk sickness, a disease caused by poisoned cow's milk. The boy who would later face the bloodiest war in American history stood beside a crude wooden coffin built by his own father. No priest, no formal ceremony, just earth, silence, and grief. That moment carved something permanent into him. Loss would follow him throughout life, but so would endurance. His formal education totaled less than 1 year. Everything else he learned alone. He borrowed books. He walked miles to find them. He read by firelight until his eyes burned. The Bible, Shakespeare, Aesop's fables, the Declaration of Independence. Words became his weapon before he ever held power. He trained his mind the way other boys trained their bodies. Frontier life was brutal. He split rails, cleared forests, ferried goods down the Mississippi River. He saw slavery firsthand during a trip to New Orleans. Human beings sold like livestock, families separated, chains. That memory never left him. It would later shape decisions that defined a nation. As a young man, Lincoln struggled with profound melancholy. Friends described him as deeply reflective, sometimes overwhelmingly sad. Today we might call it clinical depression. He once admitted that he was the most miserable man living. After the death of his first love, Anne Rutledge, he sank into a psychological darkness so severe that friends removed knives from his room. The future president, who would inspire millions, once struggled simply to survive his own thoughts. But Lincoln possessed something rare: resilience without bitterness. He did not let suffering harden him. It deepened him. He entered politics not as a polished elite, but as a self-taught lawyer with awkward posture, long limbs, and a high-pitched voice. He lost elections. He failed in business. He faced humiliation. Yet each defeat refined him. He studied law intensely and developed a reputation for honesty so strong that people called him Honest Abe. In court, he preferred fairness over theatrics. He would refuse cases he believed unjust. His marriage to Mary Todd was passionate and turbulent. Mary was educated, socially ambitious, emotionally intense. She believed Abraham was destined for greatness before he did. Their relationship was marked by love and tension, intellectual partnership and emotional storms. Together they faced unimaginable grief. Their son Edward died at age 4. Later, their beloved son Willie died in the White House during the war. Mary unraveled emotionally. Lincoln carried both national tragedy and personal devastation simultaneously. In 1858 came the Lincoln-Douglas debates. Though he lost the Senate race, he gained something far greater: national recognition. He argued not for immediate abolition everywhere, but against the expansion of slavery. His stance was moral but politically strategic. He understood timing. He understood persuasion. He knew that if you moved too fast, the nation would fracture before it was ready. Then came 1860. When Lincoln won the presidency, Southern states began seceding before he even took office. He had not yet signed a single law, yet the nation was already tearing apart. 7 states left the Union before his inauguration. The Civil War was not his creation, but it would become his burden. He walked into the presidency facing the collapse of the United States. War tested him beyond imagination. Casualty reports arrived daily. Thousands dead at Antietam, Shiloh, Fredericksburg, Gettysburg. Each name etched in blood. Lincoln visited hospitals. He shook hands with wounded soldiers. He read letters from grieving mothers. He carried those faces in his memory. He also faced critics from every side. Radical abolitionists thought he moved too slowly. Conservatives thought he went too far. Newspapers attacked him mercilessly. Political rivals called him a tyrant. When he suspended habeas corpus to maintain order, he was accused of dictatorship. He wrestled with the paradox: how do you preserve liberty by temporarily restricting it? He often sat alone at night in the White House, reading telegrams from generals. He searched desperately for decisive leadership in the field. General McClellan hesitated repeatedly. Lincoln grew frustrated. "If General McClellan does not want to use the army," he once remarked, "I would like to borrow it." Eventually, he found Ulysses S. Grant, a man who fought relentlessly. When critics complained that Grant drank too much, Lincoln replied, "I can't spare this man. He fights." Then came the Emancipation Proclamation. It was both a moral act and a strategic weapon. By freeing enslaved people in Confederate territories, he transformed the war into a fight for human freedom. Europe, especially Britain, could no longer easily support the Confederacy without appearing pro-slavery. The decision was bold, controversial, irreversible. On January 1st, 1863, Lincoln signed the proclamation with a trembling hand. He had been shaking hands for hours at a New Year's reception. He paused before signing, worried that a weak signature would look uncertain. "If my name ever goes into history," he said quietly, "it will be for this act." At Gettysburg in 1863, he delivered just 272 words. 2 minutes. That was all. But in those 2 minutes, he redefined America. The war was no longer simply about preserving the Union. It was about ensuring that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. He elevated sacrifice into purpose. As the war dragged on, Lincoln aged visibly. Photographs show the transformation. The youthful lawyer became a gaunt, lined figure. War carved his face the way hardship carved his childhood. He carried the suffering of the nation in his expression. Yet he never surrendered his humanity. He told jokes. He used stories to disarm tension. Humor was his shield. Beneath it, however, lay constant reflection. He questioned himself relentlessly. Was he doing enough? Was he doing too much? Could the Union truly be restored without hatred consuming it? In April 1865, the Confederacy collapsed. General Lee surrendered to Grant at Appomattox Courthouse. The war was effectively over. The nation breathed again. 5 days later, Lincoln attended a play at Ford's Theater. He felt hopeful that night. Reconstruction plans were forming in his mind. A path of reconciliation rather than revenge. He wanted the South reintegrated gently. "With malice toward none, with charity for all," he had said in his second inaugural address. During the performance, actor John Wilkes Booth slipped into the presidential box. A single shot shattered the future. Lincoln did not die instantly. He was carried across the street to a boarding house. For hours, doctors stood helplessly. Cabinet members wept quietly. Mary Todd collapsed in grief. At 7:22 a.m. on April 15, 1865, Abraham Lincoln died. Secretary of War Edwin Stanton said softly, "Now he belongs to the ages." But what does that mean? It means a boy born in poverty redefined a nation. It means a man who battled depression preserved democracy. It means leadership rooted not in ego, but in conscience. Lincoln was not flawless. He evolved. He hesitated. He calculated. But at his core, he believed the United States represented an unfinished experiment. And that experiment demanded moral courage. He saved the Union. He shattered slavery's expansion. He reframed equality as a national promise. Yet he did not live to see the full consequences of his choices. Reconstruction faltered. Racial injustice persisted. The struggle he tried to resolve continued long after his death. Perhaps that is what makes his story enduring. Lincoln was not a mythic hero carved from stone. He was a deeply human man carrying unbearable responsibility while fighting his own internal darkness. His greatness was not in perfection, it was in perseverance. In the quiet of night, one can imagine him again seated alone, reading by candlelight, the same way he did as a child, the same hunger for knowledge. The same belief that words matter, that justice matters, that unity, though fragile, is worth fighting for. History remembers victories and speeches, but beneath them stood a man who knew loss, doubt, fear, and still chose to act. Abraham Lincoln did not simply lead a war. He carried a nation through its moral reckoning and paid for it with his life. But to understand Abraham Lincoln only as the man who signed the Emancipation Proclamation or delivered the Gettysburg Address is to misunderstand him entirely. The true Lincoln was more complicated, more conflicted, and far more human. He lived in constant negotiation with himself. Lincoln had a temper. Few people realize this. He could burn with anger when generals failed him or when political rivals betrayed him. But instead of exploding publicly, he developed a ritual. He would write what were later called hot letters. Furious, precise, devastating letters meant to wound. Then he would fold them, place them in a drawer, and never send them. He understood something profound. Power combined with anger is dangerous. He feared becoming ruled by emotion more than he feared being criticized. Leadership to him meant restraint. During the Civil War, the weight of command became almost unbearable. Casualty numbers climbed into the tens of thousands. Entire towns lost generations of young men. Each telegram that arrived at the White House carried the possibility of catastrophe. Lincoln often visited military hospitals unannounced. He would sit beside wounded soldiers, hold their hands, and speak softly with them. He did not delegate compassion. His face changed over those 4 years. Photographs from 1860 show a relatively youthful man. By 1865, the transformation was dramatic. His cheeks had hollowed, lines etched deeply around his eyes. The war was not only fought on battlefields, it was carved into his features. And yet, even in that darkness, he joked. Humor was not frivolity for Lincoln. It was survival. He told long frontier stories in cabinet meetings. Some colleagues found them inappropriate during wartime. But Lincoln understood morale, even among leaders, required relief. Laughter allowed men to breathe before returning to unbearable realities. Religion, too, evolved for him. As a young man, Lincoln had been skeptical of organized religion. He questioned doctrine. He resisted blind faith. But war changed him, not into a fanatic, but into a philosopher of faith. He began speaking of God not as a partisan force, but as a moral judge beyond both North and South. My concern is not whether God is on our side, he once said, but whether we are on God's side. That statement reveals the depth of his introspection. He did not presume divine endorsement. He feared divine judgment. Perhaps the most misunderstood aspect of Lincoln's legacy is his evolving position on race. Early in his career, his views were moderate by modern standards, even cautious. He opposed the expansion of slavery, but did not initially advocate full social equality. But war transforms men. Responsibility accelerates moral clarity. By the final year of his life, Lincoln had moved significantly. In his last public speech in April 1865, he openly supported limited black suffrage, especially for educated black men and black veterans who had fought for the Union. That speech sealed his fate. John Wilkes Booth, present in the crowd, reportedly said, "That means citizenship. That is the last speech he will ever give." Lincoln's moral evolution made him a target. Strategically, Lincoln was far sharper than critics assumed. He formed what historians later called a team of rivals. Instead of surrounding himself with loyal admirers, he appointed former political opponents to his cabinet. William Seward, Salmon P. Chase, Edward Bates. Powerful, ambitious men who had competed against him. He understood something essential about democracy. Strong leadership does not silence opposition. It absorbs and manages it. He listened carefully. He allowed debate. But when the decision was made, it was final.